Argentina last weekend got a new president who sounds completely crazy, even by South American standards.
¿Sabes qué es esto, hijo de... ¡Pará! ¿Sabes qué es? La bandera anarcocapitalista, ¿sí? La bandera de los liberales libertarios. El amarillo tiene que ver con la capacidad de generar riqueza, es decir, el oro.
Now, to be honest, until I saw that, I paid no attention to the election in Argentina. I mean, all of South America seems so hopeless, so badly managed for decades now, often by populists, leftists, the odd dictator, who've just squandered its promise, and Argentina's no different. Inflation now, 150%. But look at the value of its currency. 10 years ago, an Australian dollar was worth 5 pesos. Now it buys 233 pesos. So you might believe that after that, yes, Argentinians might be desperate enough to vote for just about anyone, including this economist who's unaligned, who does at least have a very photogenic partner and is a supporter of Israel, even though much of the media damns him as of the far right. He says no as a libertarian anarcho-capitalist, as you just saw. But this president is very clear. What Argentina cannot afford any more of is a leader of the left. And he's been campaigning to put a chainsaw through the bureaucracy and the spending. Well, joining me is Michael Reid, writer, journalist, speaker, visiting professor at the London School of Economics, whose books on South America include Forgotten Continent and Brazil. Michael Reid, thank you for joining me, but who is this new president that made my eyes wide open like never before?
Well, thank you for having me. I mean, he is an outsider. I mean, 3 years ago, nobody in Argentina had heard of him. He has won the presidency with that campaign, some of which you showed, of being a channel for the immense anger and frustration that Argentines feel because for the last 10 years, there's been no economic growth. Inflation, as you mentioned, is what is heading for 200% this year. The central bank has no reserves. The government deficit is very large. It's financed by just printing pesos, and thus the value of the peso goes down. And many people were very fed up with the ruling Peronists who have been there for most of the past 20 years and have a powerful machine, but they really have no policies to get the country going again. Now, the big question is, can Milei actually deliver serious economic reform? He got a very large popular mandate in the vote, but his party is very small. He doesn't have a majority in the Congress. And you showed that, there are questions about how stable a personality he has and how effective he will be at doing the negotiations he will have to do if he is to govern.
I'm just wondering if he's doing it to get the attention. Being unaligned like that, you don't have the party machine behind you, so you've got to do something to get people to look at you. Being a maniac, I guess, helps. Or is he maybe, look, I'm trying to look at the bright side here, an eccentric who actually does know, once he's in office, what's good for his country? Have you got any idea about that?
Well, I think he's clearly a very effective communicator. And, communicators in this world today tend to do quite well. But, I would repeat, it's one thing to get to the presidency, another thing to govern quite a large country, right? And a complicated country. And he's not stupid. I mean, he's an economist. He hasn't been a kind of particularly prominent economist. He worked in the private sector for quite a long time. What we don't know, and there are lots of things we don't know about him, we don't know how good he will be at building a team, at delegating and letting bright people get on with the job,
Yeah, well, from the capering, I'm not sure he is a delegator, to be honest. Look, Michael, I'm just grabbing at straws here, okay, for Argentina's sake, if nothing else. When he talks instead of shouts, and when he shouts, the language is atrocious. I'm hearing something that's actually a little bit more like Margaret Thatcher than Coco the Clown. Here, for example, is one thing.
El socialismo es siempre y en todo lugar
un fenómeno violento, asesino y empobrecedor. Esa es la característica del socialismo.
Look, Michael Reid, you know, we can all criticise him for all that, but I tell you what, there are not many distinguished leaders in Argentinian history to say, well, look, that was the model. Has socialism, in fact, like he implies, ruined Argentina?
Well, I think there's no doubt that the Argentine state is too big and too inefficient, right? And that the private sector is weighed down with a lot of controls and regulations and so on. You know? I mean, I think there's an important point in what you're hinting at, right? In that, I mean, some of his proposals are, frankly, not operable. No? I mean, dollarizing a country, adopting the dollar as the currency in a country where one of the chronic problems has been lack of dollars. It's just not going to happen, right? Abolishing the central bank is not a good idea. You need a proper central bank that does the job properly, right? But what he has shown over the last month, since the first round of the presidential election, is that to the extent that he needed allies, he's shown that he will be flexible on policy questions, and there is a core of truth or the right thing to do in what he's saying. I mean, Argentina does need a smaller and more effective state. It needs to cut public spending. It needs to get the economy growing. It needs the central bank to behave as a proper central bank. You know, so let's see.
Let's fingers crossed. Michael Reid, thank you for bringing sense to what seemed a bit like a circus. I appreciate that.